Hello, and welcome to the Atheist Experience. I'm your host, Matt Dillahunty. Joining me this week, Tracy Harris.
Hello.
How are you?
Good.
We're so glad you could join us today. Oh, screw all that. We're live like normal. Today is Sunday, August 17th, 2008. Thanks to everybody who's joining and watching us.
There was an article posted that included some content from me that dealt with evolution. And one of the responses that was given to the article was someone who wrote in and addressed it to me specifically and said that here's what Darwin had to say about me. And what they went on to give was a quote from Darwin that appears to be a quote that I would say promotes kind of a sexist view using evolution as a reason for that. And when I read it, my response to the person was, is there some point to that? Are you unaware that people who lived in different eras have different ideas about, and it's too bad that my printout cuts out part of the margin, I didn't recognize that, but about humans. And even though the Bible explains, for example, how you ought to treat and manage your slaves, I think you likely think slavery is not a good thing, but that the model of modern Christianity is certainly no stranger to anyone. Social views change, and beyond that, a person can hold to both correct and incorrect ideas at the same time. So what if Darwin even was as far gone as a raging pedophile? How would that invalidate whatever correct assumptions he might have made in the realm of biology? And I directed him to go look up the fallacy definition for ad hominem, because my assumption about what he posted was Darwin was a sexist, and therefore Tracy will not accept you should question the evolutionary, the content of his statements about evolution.
He got this part wrong, so we should just dismiss the other bit.
Right, and beyond that, he chose specifically a statement about, that would be considered sexist and directed it to a woman. So in my mind, I looked at that from my personal perspective as, if Tracy sees Darwin as sexist, she will reject what Darwin had to say.
Yeah.
And my response was, I've never made a claim that, and I'm not trying to disparage anyone, I have no idea, but I've never claimed that Darwin is a good person, or that he's always right about everything, or, all and to me, whether Darwin said it or someone else said it wouldn't have mattered. It's an observation. And
yeah, it kind of ties back to something we talked about before when like the question of the historicity of Jesus comes up, and people say, well, for example, Socrates may not have existed. He may have been a completely fictional invention of Plato to use as a mouthpiece.
Right.
And my point is, it doesn't matter to me whether Socrates existed or not. What matters is what he actually said.
Right.
His statements live or die on their own merits, and it doesn't matter whether Socrates said them or George W. Bush said them. If it's true, it's true. If it's not true, it's not true.
Correct. I mean, all that matters is that we have the character. Whether the character is a human being or whether the character is a character in a book. If I were to quote Hamlet, am I quoting Hamlet or am I quoting Shakespeare? Well, I'm quoting the character Hamlet put forward by Shakespeare. Everything Hamlet says might not be everything Shakespeare agrees with.
Right.
So, it comes in the idea that even if he's a character, he speaks on his own. Because the character, even though he might be authored by someone else, doesn't necessarily express the view of the author, although in Plato's case it probably would.
No, well, not necessarily. Well, using Socrates it probably does, or usually does.
Right.
But Plato would construct dialogues with a number of fictional speakers arguing all points of view. So clearly what his characters said didn't represent him. The reason, by the way, to sidetrack for half a second, the reason why it's a different case with the question of the historicity of Jesus is that what he says is intrinsically tied to who he is. If you say that you are a god, then your existence actually, comes into question.
Well, in fact, I guess you could argue that what he said is actually less important than whether or not he existed.
Yeah.
Because
if
I were, for example, a fundamentalist Christian, it really wouldn't matter what Jesus had said. If I believed that he was God and that I should do what he says, then whatever he says is going to be what I should do.
Right.
So the words of Jesus become unimportant insofar, important to the Christian, maybe in directing their life, but not...
Their truth value is not important.
Right.
They are asserted as truth because of the authority.
Right. The authority is who matters and not what he said.
And that'll actually tie into kind of what we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
By the way, Darwin was a racist and a sexist.
Okay.
No surprise there. So was almost everybody Darwin knew. The concepts of equality hadn't quite triggered in.
But to be honest, even if he was uniquely horrible in those aspects, it would in no way affect any observations that he made that did pan out to be verified.
Right.
You know, if something is observable and someone says it, if Darwin says, you know, the sun rises in the morning, that doesn't change just because he might not be a nice person.
Yeah.
And anything else he might say that is completely wrong and completely fallacious doesn't invalidate an observation that he might make that is correct.
Yeah.
So even though I hit on that by saying people can hold to opinions that are both correct and incorrect, I didn't really get to it as closely as one of the other posters who said, I presumed, and I believe I presumed fairly, that his worldview incorporates some form of authoritarianism embedded in church/religious leaders or icons. After all, it seems he presumed that scientists, many but not all, considered Darwin to the same degree of infallibility as Catholics do the Pope, or as Muslims do Muhammad, or as Mormons Joseph Smith, Scientologists Ron Hubbard, etc., etc. And what I began to realize is that when he posted the comment from Darwin, what he was actually doing was telling me how he viewed me. He wasn't telling me how he viewed the issue. And so my response to him as saying, you're making an ad hominem, was almost a response that said, you're trying to say that because he said one thing that was wrong, that anything he says that is right should be disregarded. But in reality, what he was trying to communicate was that he perceives that I perceive Darwin as authoritarian.
Right.
So I was kind of stunned by that, because that's when I started to see, like, oh, he's not making a statement about how he views it. He's making a statement how he views that I view it. And in that regard, he's making a huge error in that he's considering that I consider it authoritarian. That the reason that I would accept any sort of evolutionary claim is because Darwin said it. And I will say to a larger degree, many Christians would say, because science says it.
Right.
And my response to that is, no. That's, you know, like we were talking about this in one of the emails, that's just wrong. If Darwin says a thing and I can observe it, it's correct. I mean, I don't even know how to get around that. If it's observable and you can see it again and again and again, and you can test it, and you can go in and make predictions with it, and the thing holds up again and again and again, I mean, I don't know how to say that the thing doesn't stand on its own. Like you said, Socrates' words stand on their own.
Yeah.
Well, the reality of you know, there's an evolutionary reality, right? There's a reality to evolution that is observable. And whether Darwin says it, or even if you outlawed anybody saying it, it doesn't make it go away.